We have had some overcast and cooler spring weather here this week, which is actually very abnormal here in Utah. So it is fun to have a cloudy day. And we took advantage of that on our weekend to get some more yard work done. We had a very overgrown lilac bush that we decided to just give a hard prune to and give it a little bit of a restart out at our front entrance. It was a little bit of a blind spot pulling out of our driveway, so I thought we would give it a chance to just be reshaped over the years and we wouldn't miss it too much at this point while we're still trying to get our property a little bit cleared. And we have 4 other lilac bushes that weren't quite as overgrown that need some trimming. We had to borrow our neighbor's tools for that, and we're planning on renting a mulcher once we get everything trimmed and taking care of this growing pile of debris. This week I decided to remember to celebrate Taco Tuesday, especially because it was Cinco de Mayo, and so I planned for tacos and Mexican food for dinner that night. Now, we moved from Georgia to Utah a little less than 2 years ago, and one of the things my girls loved in Georgia was the Mexican restaurant near our house, and my parents would often take us there after church on Sundays, and my girls grew up loving beans and rice from the Mexican restaurant. And unfortunately, the Mexican food in Utah is not quite what we're used to. And so after trying a few restaurants here and realizing that it didn't quite satisfy the craving my girls were having for refried beans and rice, I decided to do some research and figure out how to make it on my own. So today I am making Mexican beans and rice like we used to eat at our Mexican restaurant in Georgia. The beans I soaked overnight, pinto beans soaked overnight, and then I put them in the crock pot with salt and water and some onion and let those cook all day. Now, I discovered that the key to really amazing refried beans is a lot of lard. That was not something an ingredient I'd ever used before, but once it comes time to cook the refried beans, I will get the lard going in a pot, and then you can add some diced onion. My girls really don't like chunks of onion in their food, and so for the sake of peace, I leave the onion out, get the lard really hot, and then start adding the refried beans and mashing them in the lard and adding some of the bean liquid, cooking liquid, till it gets to the right consistency. I use my immersion blender to get it nice and smooth. And then the secret to the Mexican rice was a tomato bouillon seasoning that I bought specifically for this recipe, and it really gave us the taste that we were missing in our Mexican rice. So again, you can add diced onion and peas and carrots to this rice, but my girls prefer it without. And so I use a little bit of tomato sauce, some of the tomato bouillon, and basmati rice that I cook in some oil before adding the liquids to simmer on the stove. We also have track practice this evening, and so I will stay home and get dinner ready for the girls when they get back from track. And that is something that our 4 oldest girls are doing. We haven't done a lot of organized sports as a family just because it seemed like a lot of work to get all of the girls doing what they wanted to do. And I didn't really love the idea of being away from home a lot of the evenings, or Josh and I being split up, taking different girls to different things. So that was just a choice we made as the girls were younger, where we prioritized being at home over doing organized sports. But now that we are in a place where we have more access maybe to sports than we did in the past, we're trying to find some things that they can jump into even if they haven't done them all growing up, and then things that they'd be able to do with our local schools on their teams during the school year. So track was one that a lot of people recommended for beginners that are in middle and high school. And so our rec league offered a summer track team, and so the 4 older girls are trying that out, and they have their first meet on Saturday. So I was thinking about what I should talk about this week, and I thought I would talk about using technology in a large family when you are not a techie person. So I am definitely not a techie person. Like every time my phone updates, it bothers me because I have to learn all these new motions on the phone, and sometimes I have to re-enter all the passwords I don't remember. So I'm not naturally someone who likes to try out a lot of tech, and a lot of times technology in our home ends up frustrating me because nobody else knows how to work it. It's never working right. It's glitching. I'm always the one that has to problem solve and figure out what to do. But I have also seen that tech can really help in some ways a large family and help me do some of the things I want to do, get some of the things done that I want to get done, and make it easier. So I'm going to share quite a few things that I use in our large family technology-wise, and you may not look at our house and our family and even notice that we use a lot of tech, but these are things that I have used for many years that I've grown to love, and I could do without them, but I'm choosing not to do without them. And then I'm sharing some things I'm on the fence about, like there's some good, there's some bad, not sure where I fall with it. And then some things that I thought would be life-changing in our large family that really weren't. And so maybe you agree with some of these things, disagree, maybe you'll get some ideas of things to try or take some things off your wish list that you thought would change your life. But anyways, here are tech things that I use, don't use, and I'm on the fence about in our large family. So I'm going to split this into two groups. I'm going to talk about things we use in our home and things we use for our kids. So I'll go through the home things first. The first tech item I use in our home that I love are lights that are on a timer and turn it on and off with a remote. So I am someone who hates overhead lights. I don't know how many of you are in there with me, but when my kids and my husband would go into a room at night and it was dark, the first thing they reached for was the overhead light. And I had lamps and I had bulbs in the lamps, but no one was turning them on. And I could have set a timer, every evening and gone around and turned on all the lamps, but I wanted to simplify that. So a while ago, probably 6-7 years ago, I started buying light bulbs that would come on and off on a schedule. And they were also hooked up to Alexas that were in different rooms where you could turn them on and off. So I would have them come on at a certain time in the mornings. I'd have them come on at a certain time in the evenings. I'd have them start dimming at certain times to start getting the rooms ready for bed. And then when they were ready to go to sleep, we could just turn them on and off with an Alexa. Now, I had a lot of issues with some of those cheaper bulbs that I bought on Amazon. If we ever had a power outage, which happened a lot in Georgia because there were always storms knocking out the power, the bulbs would start flashing, flashing to be repaired. And it was usually in the middle of the night. My husband and I would frantically go around and switch off all the lights that were flashing because we were just too tired to deal with it. So moving into this new house, I knew that I wanted to try something different and maybe invest in some bulbs that would be more dependable than the cheaper ones on Amazon. So I read a lot of reviews and I ended up going with the Phiips Hue brand. And at first the price tag was a little bit of a shock compared to what I was used to with the bulbs I was buying off Amazon. But after using them for a few weeks, I already realized it was worth the price because the app is so much easier to use than some of the apps that were required for the Amazon bulbs I was buying. And then the lights are so much more dependable and they don't disconnect nearly as infrequently as the ones did before. So one part of the light bulbs though that had changed is I was no longer going to use Alexas in all of my kids' rooms. I'd mostly use them as sound machines at night. We'd use them to control the lights, and then sometimes they listen to things on them. And I decided I was just not going to have any more Alexas in the house. And my one problem with that was how they turned their lights on and off at night when they were ready to go to bed. To solve that, I invested in some little Phiips Hue Remotes for each bedroom so that they could turn their lamps on and off in the evenings as they needed to. So the lights still come on a schedule in the evenings. So when they walk into their bedrooms at night, lights are on. Nobody reaches for the overhead light anymore. And then at night when they're ready to turn their lights off, they can use this little remote. And you wouldn't necessarily think this looks super techy when you look at their rooms, but just having the lights come on and turn off on a consistent schedule really helped me just enjoy the ambiance of our bedrooms without all the work that comes from going around and switching on all the lights at night. So if you have the opportunity to invest in automatic bulbs and switches, I do recommend the Phiips Hue brand, and I recommend them for all of your living areas. I have our lights and lamps downstairs just on a schedule, so they come on in the mornings and they turn off in the evenings. And if I needed to, I could change that on my phone, but I don't need the remotes downstairs. I just have the remotes for the bedrooms. Another thing that I invested in when we moved into this house is blinds that are motorized and on a schedule. So in our house in Georgia, we had beautiful plantation shutters that were already installed on all the windows when we moved in. But when we were leaving that house, I did not want to go the plantation shutter route again. I love natural light. I love for as much natural light to come in the rooms as possible. And so the plantation shutters kind of blocked a lot of light, and then if you were to open them, they needed space on either side of the window for the shutters to go in. And so while they were great in that house because they were already there, I did not want to reinstall those in our future homes. And so when we moved into this house, in all the bedrooms, I invested in some motorized blinds, and I got them from Ikea. And I had read reviews again about them, and some people were really happy with the Ikea blinds. And so I gave them a try because they were much more affordable than some of the other options. And I have loved them so much. Now, my dream is in the morning for us all to wake up to the morning light. And so that was something that I was looking into with these blinds. So I have them on a schedule to come up at sunrise. But obviously I wanted them shut all night while the girls are sleeping. The minute it gets dark, I want the blinds down so they can change and stuff without risk of anybody seeing in. So the blinds go down at sunset, they come up at sunrise. I did not get the blackout blinds because I kind of wanted my older girls, who I've talked about in past videos, were very much on kind of a late night, late morning schedule. Just naturally, our family rhythm has always been that. And so I'm not really worried about them waking up too early. Now, our toddler does wake up earlier, but I haven't noticed a difference if she sleeps kind of in a darkened room or not. She's just waking up on her own. So I did not get blackout ones, but I do think they sell a blackout version, or in rooms that like a baby or toddler needed blackouts, I'd probably just pair them with a curtain. And then the other thing I love about them is I have them set on schedules to try and block some of the really intense sun during the mornings and afternoons. So like I said, our house is very sunny. Our rooms are kind of set up on a square, so someone's room is always getting sun. And we're in Utah, and the sun is very intense, especially in the summer. We have a hard time keeping the upstairs cool. So I have the blinds set on a schedule to lower at different points during the day to block out some of that heat and sun, and then to raise back up when the sun has moved on. So I like that because the rooms are getting as much natural light as possible, and because they're not blackout, they're not darkening the room too much to use it during the day. But then when we do have that intense sun coming in, I've noticed a big difference when I have the blinds closed as opposed to when I have them just left open all day. The third and last thing I love tech-wise as a big family is I love my Ring doorbell and alarm system. So in Georgia, we had just a Ring doorbell, and I think we ended up adding like a back porch camera, and those were great. And then when we moved to kind of a rental house for my husband's job in Utah, that was temporary housing, I ended up investing in the full Ring security system for that house. We were moving into a house, and some of my girls were going to be sleeping in the basement, and there were windows down there in their bedroom that were on a different floor than me, which had never been the case before. And then we were moving into a neighborhood that we didn't know anybody. We didn't really know what the neighborhood was like. And so just for peace of mind, this was something that we invested in, and I really loved it. We left it there at that house because the house is kind of used for ministry situations. So I hope that it could be a blessing to the families that came after us. And then I've started slowly adding Ring items to this house and look forward to adding many more. So my favorite things are obviously the doorbell, and I love having an exterior camera and kind of a spotlight at any exterior entrance so that anytime there's any suspicious activity, I can see what's going on, and just at night, I can see what happened during the night, and I just love having tabs on what's going on. I'm a very deep sleeper, so I feel a little vulnerable when I'm sleeping, and so having that just kind of backing us up is I'm really thankful for that. And then the other thing I love are the door and window sensors. So those can just go on all your doors and windows. And once you set the alarm, if any of them were to be opened, that would signal you in however way you have that set up to let you know. And then also keeping, people out that you don't want to come in. Those have been really helpful to me. So the next area where technology has been super helpful is with my kids. Now, like most of you, I am trying to raise kids that know how to use technology, but that aren't super dependent on it or obsessed with it, and that can be challenging. I'm also trying to keep them safe in a world where they have access to everything in the world and all the people in the world at the tip of their fingers. So that has been a challenge, and it has been something where I've been tempted sometimes to just be like, no to all of it. But I know that's probably not the wisest choice, and I need to teach moderation and also teach safe ways to use it. And so these are some things that have been really helpful technology-wise with my kids. The first thing that I have used for probably 10 to 12 years and really appreciated are the Amazon Kindles, but specifically when they have the Amazon Free Time app installed. So Amazon Free Time is, it may not even be called Free Time anymore. It may be just called Amazon Kids. It's changed names sometime in there, but it's an app where they vet a lot of the games, shows, and books that they allow on there. And so there's no access to the internet if you turn off the browser, which I always just left that off. There's no access to internet. So when we would go on trips or car rides, or sometimes when I had a toddler who was dropping a nap in the afternoons and I wanted them to have a quiet time on their bed, but they would fall asleep right at the end of that quiet time, if I wasn't careful, I would let them have this as a little time to play games. So I highly recommend the Amazon Kids app on these Kindles. I think if you buy one, you get a year free and you can have up to 5 kids on it. And then there's been different ways that I have vetted what is allowed on there. Sometimes I've just turned all the shows and books off completely. I wasn't able necessarily to go through everything that was offered in the age range that you selected and make sure that it was something I wanted my kids to read or watch. So sometimes we would just use them for games, and my kids were totally fine with that. Another way that I kept them as safe as possible is sometimes I would set the age level very low, like lower than my kid actually was. So the shows and books that were available, I still felt like they were fine for their age and things my kids wanted to watch. I've always tried to keep our media that we consume maybe not as advanced as the rest of the world is doing it. But I would set the age limit lower so that the shows and books they were showing I was sure wouldn't be too scary. There's also ways to completely block certain things. So it's hard to go through and block everything because there's just so much that they offer. And then you can also on your phone see what they're playing, what they're spending their time on, and if something is becoming obsessive or maybe inappropriate, you can do that. But I've never had them exposed to anything inappropriate, and we have used it for over 10 years. And so that has been a nice way to allow them to have a tablet, and one that I don't feel like they have to use around me 100% of the time, but also control what they're using the tablet for. I know these are all the rage right now, but I love our Yoto Players. So I got these in 2022 or 2023. And when I saw the idea, I was like, that is something I have been waiting for as a mom who likes to let my kids listen to audiobooks and music, especially when they're having rest times on their bed. But I didn't always have an easy way. We did CD players and CDs from either stuff I'd bought or borrowed from the library for a long time. And I went through so many CD players because my kids were kind of rough on them, and there's not a lot of options for CD players out there anymore. So I love the Yoto, and I know there's tons of information out there. I will say, like, I know it's a popular gift for a toddler, but actually my toddlers aren't really great at operating it or really caring about it. I found that my girls really consistently start using them more like when they're 5 or 6, and I have friends whose kids are different. But I would say don't get discouraged if your 2, 3, 4-year-old is not into it. I would just say wait a little bit and they might enjoy it more. And then my girls have used it all the way up through elementary and middle school to listen to different books. So I do have Yoto cards that I've invested in, and I keep in this case, but what I have found more helpful than this is just to get a card for each girl, a make your own card. So at one point I made like fun little labels with their picture on it, and these little rings, because we have some different things that they listen to. And then I can load all of the stories of the cards I use directly onto a make your own card. And then if they lose this card, they don't actually lose the whole story. Because what would happen is sometimes with these collections, they would borrow a card and they would lose it. Or I would try and be really strict about like, don't take a card unless you're going to put your other card back. And they would try, but they're little kids, they're crazy sometimes, and they didn't always follow that. And so I keep this myself safe. And then all of these are loaded on my phone on the app, and then I can just put whatever story they want on here. And then more recently, instead of buying the actual Yoto cards, I have been buying audiobooks from a website that gives you the entire file. So a website like Audible, I don't buy books from there because you don't own the file afterwards. So I use a website called libro.fm there's a blogger, I think it's Everyday Reading or something. She has a really great tutorial on how to buy audiobooks from them and then do make your own cards from that. So I have been able to do a lot of more advanced books, literature books for my older girls to listen to. They've listened to The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings. I have To Kill a Mockingbird on there. All the Harry Potter books I just bought on my own instead of buying through Yoto, and I think they end up being a little cheaper that way. And so that has been super helpful and kept my girls interested in audiobooks for longer. I do have some neurodivergence in our house. We have dyslexia, we have ADHD. And so for some of my girls, their reading skills came later. And I was so glad that they could still fill their minds with really great books and stories, even when their reading skills were still developing. And so that all that rich vocabulary was there, all those ideas were there. They have been a well-loved part of our family, and I would highly recommend them. I have found that Bluetooth headphones can sometimes be more of a pain than they're worth. And so we have always just done headphones with a cord. They're pretty cheap to buy, but you also end up having to replace them every once in a while, especially if you have a cat that chews through the cords like I did. So definitely with a pair of headphones, I think they are an amazing tool. We even use them in homeschooling too. And I can talk about that more later, but I would highly recommend these. And like I said, if your toddler isn't into it yet, just give it a little bit of time. And then also consider getting some more advanced books for your older kids through an online bookstore. Another thing that my girls love, I actually don't have it at my house, but when my mom my mom and dad bought their new house here in Utah near us, she was asking about having some type of gaming system at her house. And I had seen a lot of people recommend the Nex Cube Playground. And so I recommended that for her, and she got it soon after moving in, and my girls love it. And it is so fun. It has no internet access, but it's really great on rainy days or times when they want to get their energy out. There are some games on there that just make us laugh so hard in the motions the girls do to get their player to get points or beat the other player or whatever. It's really fun when people come over to use it. They have some fun group games, have stuff that even adults enjoy. So I highly recommend that. We've had a lot of fun with that. Another thing we use, and probably my favorite piece of technology in the house, are Kindle Paperwhites. So I have been using a Kindle Paperwhite for 15 years now. My dad gave me one right after I'd had my first daughter. He's a reader and he knows that I'm a reader too, but I just graduated from college, hadn't really gotten back into reading for fun. And he gave me one as kind of a, you're doing a good job gift. And I remember the first books I read were The Hunger Games on it. And I mean, I devoured them on this while I was holding my first baby while she was napping and stuff. And since then, I have read hundreds of books on my Kindle Paperwhite. Now, I love it because it doesn't have the same type of light as like a phone or iPad would when you're reading at night. I can read, it can be totally dark. So when we've had babies sleeping in our room or when my husband is sleeping, it doesn't bother them. And I literally just read until I start falling asleep. And then I can just lay it down next to my bed and I'm not bothering anybody. And then the main reason I really love it is because I read hundreds of books for free through my library and I read them on my Kindle. So I'm kind of a little bit of a germaphobe, and the idea of having library books in my bed with me, like right before I go to sleep, not washing my hands, kind of grosses me out. And so here they're germ-free, just my own germs. And so I also don't have to have the light on, which is nice. And then I'm not paying for books that I'm only going to read one time. So yes, if it's like a classic or some nonfiction books, I may want to own a copy of it. But for the most part, if I'm reading just popular books that I've heard are good, I'm just going to read it once and then I don't want to own it. And I don't really want to pay for it. So this has been a really fun, kind of guilt-free hobby because I'm not paying extra for those books. So I use the Libby app through my library, and you can borrow books and then send them to your Kindle when you hook up your Amazon account. And then I can also send books that I've borrowed for my girls to their Kindle Paperwhites. And so this has been fun. Also a way, like when you have kids that are learning to read and they want to stay up, but you want the lights off for younger siblings, you can load a fun book onto here and be like, okay, well, you can read on your Kindle because you won't be bothering your sibling. And so it can kind of get them into reading a little earlier maybe than normal with the lights out. And they feel like a big kid getting to read on their Kindle. Now, when I moved to Utah, our county did not have the Libby app anymore. I left the Atlanta library, which was a huge library, and I was so sad to leave that. And I was pretty depressed when I lost access to it and realized I didn't have Libby anymore. But for Christmas, my husband gave me an amazing gift. You can purchase a library subscription to some counties in the United States, even if you aren't a citizen of that county, and the Queens Public Library System lets you do that. So for $50, he bought me a year-long subscription to the Queens Public Library System, and I was able to borrow books through them and read them on my Kindle still. And so that has been a great gift idea. I recommended it to some other friends here in Utah that were missing access maybe from larger county library systems and like to read on their Kindles. Some other technology things, they're not really tech, but kind of, is I do pay for subscriptions to both Spotify and YouTube Premium. So I use those a lot with homeschooling, and I can get tired of dealing with the ads, especially on YouTube. Sometimes there would just be ads that would disrupt the whole mood of what we were doing, whether it was nature journaling or watching some music online, some performances online. The ads could be kind of crazy. So those are worth it for me now. I just started doing those subscriptions, and I do have a kind of homeschool scholarship here in Utah that helps me do that. But I think even if I were to lose that, I would still invest in those things because I really I never really used YouTube when my kids were little because of the commercials and just the lack of controls on there. So now that they're older and they watch maybe tutorials for different art things or craft projects they do, I'm able to let my older girls do that and rest assured that there aren't going to be commercials shown while they're doing that. The last piece of tech that has been a huge blessing to our family is the Bark phones and watches. So when my oldest daughter was getting close to turning 14 and we decided we were going to start introducing the idea of a cell phone, I did a ton of research because I was not willing to just hand her the whole internet. And I really wanted the ability to limit what she has access to and slowly introduce things like social media as the years go by. And so I settled on the Bark phone, and I do think that the Bark phone, which is an Android, works better than just installing the Bark software on an iPhone because the iPhone controls don't allow Bark to have as much control over the phone as the Android phone does. And so I ordered one of those, and let me tell you, as an iPhone user, it was so annoying to try and set it up. Once I got it figured out, it was fine. But I was like, what have I done? Trying to work with a different operating system. And so we gave her that, and I've been so happy with the Bark phone. And I also got some Bark watches for my younger girls once we moved out to our property, and they were going to be running around these 5 acres. We do have rattlesnakes, and I just didn't know what kind of thing could happen. And I wanted a GPS locator on them, and I wanted them to be able to call me in an emergency. And so those have been very nice, and I highly recommend all of those. I recommend the Bark company to work with. I haven't tried the other companies, but I have not had any problems with Bark, except for some of that frustration trying to set up the Android phone, just because I'm not an Android user. So those are a bunch of things I use tech-wise in our large family, and I feel like they don't cause a lot of stress on me during the week. Like, they're not glitching a lot. They're more convenient than they are inconvenient, but that hasn't always been the case. And now I'll share some things that I'm kind of on the fence about and some things that are definite no for me with tech. So I'm definitely on the fence about Amazon Alexas. Like I said, regarding the lighting situation, I used to have them in the girls' rooms, and we would use them for a sound machine at night. We would use them to play music or audiobooks sometimes. But to me, they were almost more work than they were worth. And I definitely, when we moved into this new house, was trying to get away from just dependence on technology as much as possible, and my girls' awareness of the technology in their rooms. So I decided to go without the Amazon Alexas in our house after using them for 4 to 5 years in our previous house. I actually just plugged in an old one that we had in our dining room and kitchen area, because sometimes we like to play music on it when we're having like our evening cleanup time, some upbeat music. And I kind of miss that. And also I sometimes set timers on it. So I just put one in kind of our public living space again, but I've asked the girls to try not to use it. I'm putting another one down in the basement main living area because sometimes they like to listen to music and dance around to music or whatever, and let that one be kind of the one they use for that. But for the most part, I'm fine without Amazon Alexas, and that's coming from someone who did use them for 4 to 5 years in her home regularly. I just tried to find, when we moved into this house, other ways of doing the same things that I used to do with the Alexas. Another thing I'm on the fence about is Nintendo Switches. So we've had a Nintendo Switch for probably 10 years. And my girls were not really into it in the beginning. And then I had some girls embrace it more than others. And I do think it's a fun tool for like wintertime when you can't get outside as much. I think it's nice for travel. It is fun sometimes when we have friends over and they play Mario Kart. But for the last few months, I have had ours put away just because sometimes it seemed like it was becoming a bigger deal than it needed to. And I do think I'll pull it out if we go on trips or once winter rolls back around, because it can be a fun reward for them after they finish a day of school and there's not much else for them to do. And I love, especially when they're doing it together in a group. But I'm kind of on the fence about that. And if you've been wondering, like, do I need this for my kids? I would say no. And do without it for as long as you can. And then if you do get one, just be prepared to have some pretty strict guidelines around it. The last thing I'm kind of on the fence about is iPads for kids. Now, when my kids were all little, I just did not allow them to have access to an iPad. I didn't think the controls were good enough for me to be able to hand it to them and not be using it with them. And so if they were going to do something they needed it for, I would need to be sitting there using it with them. I have used the guided access option on iPhones and iPads, which can lock them into an app, and you can turn off the ability to touch anything on the screen. So I've used that sometimes with a toddler when we're traveling and they're watching a show so they don't get out of the show. And I've used that with my girls when they would use my iPads for audiobooks on Libby or Hoopla or Audible or things like that. But then I found things like the Yoto and the Kindle with the Amazon Kids app that kind of took away my need for iPads. And so now we do have some iPads that we got for a promotion when we switched phone companies. And I've set them up for the girls to be able to use those for certain things, but those are kept in a very like high traffic area, our dining room and kitchen, and used mostly for school. Sometimes my girls will use them to look up different things on Pinterest or crafting things, recipes, stuff like that. And then my oldest daughter and I do use them to play off of music, sheet music, which is a whole nother thing. So we use iPads, but if your kids are little, I would say try and do without it. And I would not recommend ever just letting your child have unfiltered access to an iPad or access to it when you're not around. I was very, very careful with what my girls were exposed to when they were little, and I have no regrets about that. It is hard. It's a lot of work, and you do feel like maybe you miss out on doing certain things that other people are doing. Like I said, my kids did not watch YouTube growing up because I just knew I couldn't necessarily control the coming up next videos and stuff. And obviously I use YouTube now. And my older girls know how to find things they're looking for on it. But for the most part, I would say I have no regrets about not using an iPad and would be on the fence about allowing that into our family, especially when all of my girls were little. Okay, here are some tech things that I have tried and I thought they were going to solve all of my problems, and surprisingly, they have been a big flop. So the first thing is the Skylight calendar, and I used some of the homeschool scholarship money that I got to buy this because I thought it was going to solve all of our scheduling organization problems. I thought I would put the girls' chore lists on there and they would check them off. My husband and I would always be on the same page, and to be honest, it's been a huge flop because everyone forgets to look at it. Now, I do have a lot of neurodivergence, as I've said, in our family. We are pretty chaotic, and I have done my best to get us organized over the years, and I've just had to embrace the chaos instead. And so the Skylight calendar has just become kind of an expensive picture frame hanging on the wall. And so I was very surprised to find that that did not really help our family that much. So if you've been thinking the Skylight calendar would solve all of my problems, I'm here to tell you it actually didn't change anything for us. The girls love looking at pictures on the screensaver, and that's about it. The other thing that I used for many years and found was not as helpful as I thought it would be are the robotic vacuums and mops. So many years ago, I don't even know, 8-10 years ago, I had a Roomba and we used it, and then when it broke, I actually replaced it with a cordless vacuum, which was absolutely life-changing. And then I've also had experience with a robotic mop, and I just did not find it did that good of a job or it was that impressive. And for me, my thing is by the time I get the floor picked up and cleaned up for the mop or the vacuum, it's not really that hard to just finish the job and do it myself. And then I was also scarred by this story that went viral many years ago about a Roomba who ran through some dog poop on the carpet during the night and basically, painted the rest of the house in dog poop. Very funny story. If you haven't heard it, you should look it up. And so that was always in the back of my mind, running it at night while we were asleep. And so what we do instead, we just have a cordless vacuum. My husband and I just give the downstairs a vacuum. The girls help us every night. And so cordless or robotic vacuum and mop were a big flop for our family. Okay, well, that's a little glimpse into how we use technology in our large family without being super techie and dependent on it, but things that actually do save me time and improve my quality of life and the quality of life of our family.